Hola, ¿cómo están? Buenas tardes, es un gusto poder saludarlos. Como comentamos, el día de hoy el seminario se va a llevar a cabo en inglés, así que, bueno, después podemos, para quienes así lo deseen, podemos ver la opción de crear subtítulos si fuera necesario. El día de hoy el seminario se va a llevar a cabo en inglés, así que, bueno. Hi everyone, welcome to the research seminar. This time we are very happy to have with us three very exciting members from the Jaime Lucero Mexican Studies Institute at CUNY University in New York. We have Dr. Alyshia Galvez, who is the former director of the institute and is a lecturer at Lehman College. She specializes in cultural anthropology, reproduction, migration, and citizenship. We also have with us Higuera Lopez, who is the current interim director of the Institute. He has a lot of experience with community-based organizations and has founded several organizations in the US, which I'm sure he will be happy to talk about, especially in relation to education and community building. And we also have Francisco Aquina, who is member of the Mexican Institute, who will be talking to us about his experience. I'm going to leave the floor to them, and after they present, we will have questions. We will be receiving your questions through social media, and after they present, we will send the questions to them. Alyshia?
Okay, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. We look forward to any questions that might emerge and conversations that might emerge from this conversation. So I would like to open just by speaking a little bit about the period of formation of the Mexican Studies Institute. And I would like to begin actually in the year 1968, which is when ethnic studies was created in the United States in a formal way as a response to the Black Power and civil rights movements and Chicano movement on the West Coast. There were efforts to increase the representation in curricula in K-12 education and higher education of information and materials related to the cultural heritage, history, and experiences of colonization and racialization by communities of color. And there were a lot of social movements that were demanding this kind of opening of the academy at the same time that there were a lot of alternative movements in communities, such as El Museo del Barrio, which was founded really as a curriculum project in East Harlem, which was not part of the formal education system, but sought to bring information to communities. And there are a lot of other examples that we could name. Lehman College, which is where we are talking to you from, is in the Bronx. It's it's the only senior college of the City University that's in the Bronx, meaning it's a four-year school. And we were created in 1968 as a campus. Formerly, this campus was used by Hunter College. And the same year, there were student protests. There was an occupation in the City College of New York demanding Black and Puerto Rican studies. And the same year in Cal State in California, there were demands based on student mobilizations for Chicano studies. And Lehman was new, and its administration, whether because of a great sense of foresight or anxiety about the possibility of having student protests, decided to get ahead of the curve and establish the departments of Black Studies and Puerto Rican Studies before there were student protests here at Lehman. So even though City College had the student occupations demanding this and eventually did achieve it, Lehman was a little bit quicker because the administration decided to do it before the protests had really come this far. There were some, but not as extensive as at City College. And so we have the original ethnic studies department on the East Coast. Cal State has was the original ethnic studies departments on the West Coast with Chicano studies. And those departments have survived till the present. But in many cases, as the academy has at the same time become more diverse, and curriculum has become more diverse, and a lot of the demands for greater inclusion in the standard curriculum have been met, ethnic studies has survived, but has not thrived necessarily. Enrollments have not continued to grow necessarily to the same degree that they could have. So we see in some cases a starving or strangulation of some of these programs that were some of the original programs. Our department here continues to be strong, but has not seen that increase over time in enrollments. At the same time, if we look at what's happening in New York City in the 80s and 90s, we see the arrival and growth of a larger Mexican immigrant community. There had been small communities of Mexicans in New York going back to before the revolution, but we don't see a large number until the early 80s. And at some point in the 90s, late 90s, or 2000, 2001, some members of the CUNY administration and the Mexican consulate decided to look at the numbers and began to see that there were not, even though the growth of the Mexican community had been dramatic, there was not yet the representation within CUNY of the same percentage that Mexicans were beginning to comprise in the city. So there was an effort to try to open the doors to CUNY. At the time, and it continues to be today, that a lot of the barriers were that people who didn't have immigration status were concerned that they wouldn't be able to study, or that they wouldn't be able to afford to study if they could not access financial aid. And so those original efforts were largely centered just on spreading the word that since 2000, that New York State grants access to in-state tuition, irrespective of immigration status, to anyone who graduates from a New York high school. So those sorts of information campaigns were key, and there was an effort to build Mexican studies. So when we were created, finally in 2012, it was a result of trying to consolidate and institutionalize this effort to sort of open the doors of the university and try to get greater numbers of Mexican students enrolled. And there was an effort to consolidate and institutionalize those efforts. And so when we were finally approved by the CUNY Board of Trustees after a proposal process, a bureaucratic process of getting approval and funding for the startup of the Institute, it was in February of 2012, which ironically was essentially the same period when we saw Tucson in Arizona undoing its K-12 Mexican Studies program. And so we were proud, but also cognizant of the incredible importance and poignancy of creating something like this at the same time that it's being undone in other regions. And so we were trying to, stem the tide of this anti-immigrant sentiment and some specifically anti-Mexican traits within the anti-immigrant sphere. And so we were, really trying to defy and resist that effort and serve students and families and open the doors of the university in a way that was meaningful and accessible for more families. So I think now I'll turn it over to Jose, who's the current director, who will talk about some of the specific things that we've been doing and some of the philosophies that we have as far as how we do the work of the Institute.
Thank you, Alyshia. So yeah, I just want to share with you also the, I hope you're seeing, it's loading. I don't know if you can actually, there we go. So just to share with you the mission of the Institute that Alyshia just tapped a little bit into. The Mexican Studies Institute was founded, as you mentioned, in 2012, and so it has three pillars. One of them is to seek the enrollment of the Mexican American students, as she was mentioning, and also is to foster research with and about Mexico and Mexican Americans in the United States and in Mexico. And the other component is also has a social aspect of it, and to be almost the epicenter of the different community-based organizations in New York, so they can consider, or they can find this place and consider it their own. So I'm going to just real quick talk a little bit about how did the Institute start promoting the enrollment of Mexican Americans into CUNY. And there was a great program that was designed by the Institute by different administrators, and especially under the leadership of Professor Galvez. And it was the CUNY becas, the scholarships. So the scholarship program presented an opportunity to provide students with financial aid and the opportunity to access higher education. Now, that being said, the program has evolved little by little into a fuller program where we can actually, well, first of all, sorry for the slide in Spanish, but the group right now has over 100 alumni from 8 different countries of origin. And some of the notable alumni have become executive directors of community-based organizations. Others have become columnists and journalists. But most of all, they have become agents of change in the community. So we're very proud of the program. And I just wanted to mention these aspects as basically factors that promote the retention and graduation rate within the students, that the cohort, each cohort. So as I mentioned earlier, we provide the physical scholarship. The scholarship is basically financial aid. So they can, it covers a year of scholarship tuition. And aside from that, we have designed a structure where we as administrators and the office provide also administrative support, the know-how, how to navigate the system, that sometimes it's a little overwhelming for students that are just joining the higher education sphere. And aside from that, there's different, the structure that has been designed also asks from the students to do 200 hours of community service as a form of internship. And aside from that, we provide also professional development workshops once a month to hopefully help them increment or just foster other different capacities or things that they think they can actually, that they need to work in. And also, aside from that, we provide a structure of mentorships with different entrepreneurs and just business people, Mexican business people here in New York, that function as a mentor during their time as a scholar. And this year, we're just piloting also a leadership training with another company. So with all of these factors that we have here, what we're trying to do is just trying to create a sense of quality service, of better opportunities, and just factors that will promote, hopefully, resilience in the students as students, and just providing them with a better opportunity. So as you see here, our little factor here, it would equal high quality opportunities to succeed in school. So that's what we're trying to achieve with the whole, let me see, where do I end this? There we go, here you are. So for us, this structure that we created in the Institute, we're trying to just provide different opportunities, because if we want to go into just the intentionality of providing these services, it is very important for us as administrators, as faculty, as just support system for these students. If we really want to make a difference in the way they approach school, we have to be very conscious of the role we play in promoting these aspects as students. We also wanted to invite Francisco. He is one of our becarios, scholarship recipients. He has been a becario for 2 years now. And we just wanted for him to share with you also his experience as a student that has been provided with this support structure as a student and how this actually has helped them during his trajectory.
First of all, I want to thank you for having us. And going back to what Jose said, the Institute is, I gradually came to know it through other students and organizations, and it's important to me to network, like you mentioned, with other organizations throughout New York, because I didn't know of these services. I didn't know of the help that was out there, because, you know, as a undocumented student, all I had to do was work perhaps 40 hours a week or more to be able to pay tuition. And that led me with small amount of time to actually go out and explore the resources that are available to me. Because the time I did have free would be mostly to do my homeworks, do studies, and try to do extracurricular activities, because one of those things, the extracurricular activities help in the future. But once I got to know the Institute and about the scholarship program, I saw that it would make a really big change even before I applied, because I read the requirements, and one of the requirements was the internships. And the internships, some students fail to see that these opportunities help them develop skills that once they graduate, an employer can see and have an idea of the skill sets they bring to the company or to the organization they're going into. And the dynamic structure that they have with the administration support, the workshops, the mentors, is incredible. To me, it was a big doors opening, because my mentor would guide me through situations regarding my academics, minor life situations. The administration support, they would help me with dealing with the system, you know, from the bursar's office to guiding me to the right departments when it came to applying to my courses. And the internships, importantly as well, came in handy because they helped me develop more of social skills and how to handle myself as a professional. Because I do intend to continue this type of work in nonprofits, regardless of my current biology major, because I will take that and all the experiences I've been having, thanks to the Institute, to the future, to give back to the community, which is what the goal for the Institute is. And I'm also an intern here, which I quickly came to see in the students, my fellow becarios have grown. Many of them have grown in different organizations, developing different skill sets that in their profession in the future, once they graduate, definitely will help them. And it's been great having the support here, Dr. Galvez, Jose, and the rest of the becarios. Yeah, that'll be all for me.
Yeah, and I also would like Alyshia to mention a little bit about the whole purpose of the Institute, and I mentioned a little bit about the intentionality of the quality of execution of the services we provide, and and I think that part of the success of the program has been that the clear understanding of the mission of the Institute and what role we play as conveners or just facilitators to these students and to the different cohorts that we have been dealing with since 2012. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about this intentionality and the structure of the Institute.
So there are some most academic institutes, perhaps, in the United States are very academic in their orientation, and they focus primarily on offering enriching the curriculum according to the topic that they are emphasizing. We basically feel like we have not had the luxury of, not that we would want to, but that the urgency of the inequalities in our city and nationally mean that to study something in isolation from the communities that it affects would be irresponsible. And so we have simultaneously undertaken through our mission to study Mexico and Mexicans in the US, but never in abstraction, always thinking about what is the applicability of the work that we're doing in terms of research and teaching and formation of students to the community and what the community expresses as its goals and needs. And so that evolves over time. There have been some significant shifts that have changed things a little bit in terms of deferred action for childhood arrivals, for example, programs that we've added. So just to go a little bit chronologically, when we were founded, as I mentioned, we were primarily interested in increasing Mexican enrollment in the university. Even just with the pre-institute efforts that the university was making, enrollment by Mexicans in the university increased 270-something% over 10 years. And in some ways, I think that's an organic increase that would have happened no matter what CUNY did, just because of the changing demographics of New York City. But one of the things that we were really concerned about as soon as the Institute was created was not only are students arriving, but are they thriving? Are they finding a sense of community? Are they receiving a sense of welcome? Does the CUNY administration deliver accurate and up-to-date information, helpful information and services that directly serve the needs of the community? And so we found that many of our undocumented students had been given false messages that they weren't allowed to study or that they couldn't, that there would be no access to any kind of funding, even private funding, when in fact we have our scholarship program, but we also have worked to generate more opportunities and to take down some of the barriers that existed. Some of the programs that did discriminate based on immigration status have ceased to do so because of some of the lobbying efforts that we've had. So trying to raise awareness and also in the community. And so a lot of families didn't know that they could access the university, didn't know that there were ways to make it more affordable and more accessible. And also planting the seed at younger and younger ages so that young people, children are able to start thinking about college at a very early age and doing the preparatory steps with their families in order to access college. And then now we're also thinking about post-college. So we have so many becarios now who have graduated and gone on to graduate school that we're thinking a lot about postgraduate study as well as professional goals and other professional careers. And so a lot of that work has sort of expanded organically, and then we adapt to the changing circumstances nationally and globally and locally. So deferred action for childhood arrivals made it possible for many of our students to work on the books, which for many students made it easier for them to get jobs that were more closely aligned with their professional goals than they were able to do previously. Not all of our students are eligible for DACA, but those who have benefited from it. But at the same time, those who are working oftentimes have less time for some of the other things that the program entails. And so we've navigated that. And DACA also enabled students for the first time to think about studying abroad. And so we began to start adding study abroad programs. And we've done several at this point. And then after the inauguration of Trump, we decided to suspend those for the time being because we didn't feel comfortable that we would be able to guarantee a reasonable level of security for students to exit and re-enter the country. And so we've suspended those temporarily. And then the service programs, initially the becas program was very spare, very minimal, because we were under the impression that we didn't want to add to the burden, already disproportionate burden that many of our students have in terms of working and helping their families and studying. But then we came to realize that the support that they would have from each other was of great value, and that we needed to foster that by giving them opportunities to come together more and more often. And so we've built up the program strategically to try to, on the one hand, not overburden them, but at the same time, as Francisco mentioned, give them that sense of community and cohort, but also a sense of giving back and realize all that they already have available to give in terms of their knowledge and their energy and encouragement to other students and families and members of the community who can benefit from their skills and energy. But it also helps them in the future professionally to try out and think about other skills and career paths.
I don't know if you have any questions for us.
Yes, I have several questions waiting for you here. So I think I'm going to go through all of them at the same time, and then you can decide who answers what and in which order, so you know which way to it works best for you. The first question arrived. Yes, someone asked about the other 8 or the other 7 nationalities you have in the program. I think Jose mentioned that there were becarios from 8 different countries, and the question is which other countries are you working with in terms of students, and if that relates to and if you have, and if it links to the mentoring program in the terms that if you're also working with mentorees from those countries. We have another question, which I think relates to a lot of what Alyshia was already discussing in terms of research, and is about the kind of teaching and pedagogy that is needed in the program that you are developing. Just because Alyshia was mentioning that in terms of research, is quite clear that it needs to be a participatory research, the one you develop in the Jaime Lucero Mexican Institute, because you cannot study the issue isolated and without the community. So the question is regarding if you also have a very specific or developed teaching and pedagogical approach. We have another question, let me read. What have you learned along the way, in the way you support students, and if what you have learned has changed some of the program and in its current form? We have a question regarding sanctuaries, the sanctuary cities, and if the whole, the current state of and the anti-immigration feeling in the United States will be either a source to strengthen these kind of programs, or on the contrary, it's a kind of a threat for all the work you have done so far. We have also one question for Francisco, and is whether as becarios you are involved in reaching out to other non-students, but maybe prospective students that are interested in the program, and if so, how you find it so far? And we have 2 last questions, at least that I write down until now. One is regarding undocumented students. I believe you talked a little bit about that, but the question was what kind of support you give for students who have no documents and don't want to go into formal education because of the lack of documents in terms of security. And the last question is related to the undocumented documented bit, and is on building security for the community, and because you were talking about resilience, building or helping students to build resilience as students, but if in some way you also help students to develop a set of advocacy tools, not only as students, but as active members of their communities. And these are the ones that we have right now, which I believe are plenty.
I can guarantee we won't get to all of them. But why don't we start with that?
Yes.
Well, involvement in my community, and not only as a student. I worked, being an intern at the Institute, I also have I have the ability to go into different organizations, meet different people, and here we started an initiative of educational opportunities. And what they do is reach out to members of the community, do workshops to help them guide them through all levels of academics, whether it be kindergarten, high school, higher ed, and we encourage the parents to do a little more research. I encourage them to let their sons or daughters explore more their interests in academics. Again, at any level of education. And we also support those that were unable to finish school for any reason, and they are working, single parents. We encourage them as well to re-enter the educational system at any level, guiding them to different organizations, where I also intern at CREA, Centro de Recursos Educativos para Adultos, a center that provides educational support and classes to any individual that couldn't graduate high school, couldn't complete their high school diploma in their country of origin or in the United States, but want to continue and finish their equivalency test, which here is the task. It's a diploma that's given to those that couldn't, finish their high school. And qualifies them to enter different levels of employments and that are more, again, related to what they want to be as professionals. Also, a member of the Dream Team. It's a Lehman College club led by students. What we do is similar to the Initiative of Educational Opportunities, but we focus more on resources that educate the local community of the threats, especially now with the current administration. And currently we've been doing Know Your Rights workshops, where we go out to the community outreach and invite them to come to workshops where we let them know their rights as individuals, regardless of documentation, regardless of the country of origin, because they still have rights, basic human rights. And you mentioned, I believe, the undocumented student support that the Institute gives. I believe Alyshia would be better at answering this.
Because of the characteristics of the community at the current time, the biggest need for financial support is among undocumented students. Students both who qualify for DACA and those who do not qualify for DACA. Students who have legal permanent residents or citizens have access to financial aid that undocumented students do not. So the majority of our scholarship recipients are undocumented. We receive funding from many different sources, including the Instituto de Mexicanos en el Exterior, IME, and so some of our funding comes from the Mexican government, and they designate it to serve Mexican students. But as a public institution in the United States, we do not discriminate based on nationality. And so while that funding is bien etiquetado, it's designated for Mexican students, we don't ask students nationality, and we don't discriminate. And so we have students from other countries that apply and receive the scholarship. They do have to demonstrate a desire to serve the Mexican community in keeping with the Institute's mission. But we have students from several different countries. We have encouraged the countries of origin of our students, both our becarios and also CUNY students in general to do what Mexico is doing for their nationals. There really isn't a comparable program to IME Becas by any other country that we know about. And we've done advocacy for individual students with, you know, the consular representatives here in New York City, but also just lobbying at a larger level in terms of suggesting that they do what Mexico is doing. But our service of those students is not in collaboration with their countries of origin by any stretch. But also, just to answer your question about curriculum, the CUNY institutes do not offer courses or degrees. That's a role that the departments play, and we are not a department, we're an institute. So we have a different set of functionality and roles, but we encourage the departments that correspond to Mexican studies to offer minors and majors. So far, only Lehman has created a Mexican studies minor. And it's a quite active minor. We have a lot of students enrolled in it. But we also try to just provide information to students. So if they're looking for a course in Mexican studies, you know, they can find out about it through the institute. We encourage the colleges to create minors and majors. And then we offer lots of programming to supplement the teaching and learning that's going on in other departments in terms of lectures and film series and seminars, etc. We have a Mixteco course, which Jose can talk about, which we also support. It's not offered by the Institute, but it's something that we've secured the funding for.
Yes, and so that being said, Alyshia already mentioned that we cannot provide the classes, but we try to create the opportunities or the partnerships with different institutions. Alyshia mentioned the Mixteco course. We created a consortium with NYU and Columbia University and CUNY to offer indigenous language as a world foreign language course. And so by doing this, we're trying to revitalize the different indigenous languages that are spoken here in New York. Specifically in the Mexican community, we have a large Mixteco community. And so we did a partnership, collaboration with INALI, Instituto Nacional de Lenguas Indígenas in Mexico City, and where we're offering this course remotely from Mexico City, and students come to campus, and other students that are interested in the community that want to join because they want to revitalize the language, they can also join. And I just want to probably put together a few questions that you had about the, Francisco and Alyshia already mentioned a little bit about the support to undocumented students. And also somebody asked the question about resiliency and also how do we promote advocacy. And I think the process that and the structure we try to provide here is for the students to understand each of them, their trajectory of as a student, and each one has a different story and a different path. But all of them, what I think they have in common is that they actually overcame the difficulties of entering higher education and just encountering here in the Institute the support for it, and then moving on. So that's a process of resiliency that we see of basically facing adversity, and naturally or just organically, the next step comes, that's advocacy. They get involved in different community outreach programs, they get involved in different organizations in the community that serve the community, and also just by the misinformation about that Alyshia was tapping into about not higher education not being accessible for undocumented students, because most of them are undocumented and they know, and now they're seniors in the university and college, the know-how helps a lot, and they become advocates for higher education. So also part of the program requires from them to go and give workshops how to apply to college, how to apply for the scholarship, and just trying to diminish this idea that higher education is not accessible for undocumented students. So I think that would basically answer like 5 questions, and so I don't know if there's another one.
Yes, I just have 2 more that just arrived. I like the approach of replying 5 into just 1 answer. That was. One question is, and I think it links very well with what you were just discussing, the value of both formal and informal initiatives to strengthen Mexican studies, particularly from your experience. I believe you have talked about how you integrate both, but if you could discuss a little bit more about each one stream individually. And the other question that arrived is related to, sorry, I missed it. Oh, yes, the mission and the intentionality of the Institute. And well, first, it's a greeting and a congratulations to the Institute, but they also wonder if there are other institutes in the United States that share the kind of mission and intentions that you have at CUNY, and if there's some sort of a way of building network with those institutions?
Yes, I think we left one. We kind of answered one of the questions about the, I think it was about the countries. We have students from Colombia. We had from different cohorts, Colombia, Argentina, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Mexico, of course. And so different, and also last year we received different applications for the scholarship that from different countries, China, Jamaica, and they're not part of the cohort this year, but hopefully, because each year, depending on the funding, we can provide more scholarships. So just to answer that question. And about the studies, I think it's always a challenge to find out the new ways and creative ways of doing research, of offering what the community needs. So I think this, in this sense, I wasn't part of the creation of the Institute, but I think it was very, very wise to actually to have this aspect, and I will let Alyshia talk a little bit more about it, that not to only to focus on research and data, but also have this community aspect, this this civic mindedness, if you can say, about the Institute, to be with the people. And so in that sense, part of the different seminars and symposia that we try to design is around the needs of the community and how we can actually reach out to other institutes in the country and also institutions in Mexico to collaborate, so to compare what we're doing here and what is being done elsewhere. And so in that sense, going back to the Mixteco course, even though it started as a language course, little by little, we have been seeing the need of different or other possibilities for the course. For example, working together with INALI to have a certification process for community members that speak other languages, indigenous languages of Mexico, Zapoteco, Mixteco, Nahuatl, that they can become certified to become interpreters in the courts. So we're trying to design different approaches to the needs of the community. So we're trying to listen to what the community needs, and as an academic institution, try to figure out a way to offer these to the community. So I want to pass it to Alyshia regarding to the.
So it goes both directions in terms of bringing the formal academic work and activities outside of the academy, and then also bringing institutions and people operating outside of the academy into the academy. So just to give a couple of examples that I know from projects that I've worked on directly, I teach Mexican migration to the US, and the students have a service learning component. So even though they're studying in a formal context, a 4-credit course in which they're reading all of the major texts that are important for understanding Mexican migration to the US, from the start of the semester, they're required to identify a service project. And so some do things like tutoring with adult learners, or teaching a class, or working at the Educational Opportunities Initiative, or conducting interviews with community members that go onto our website as part of our archive. So they're doing things that directly connect the work in the classroom to beyond the classroom. And then the inverse, we try to make what's happening in the classroom useful and relevant to people working on the ground. And so, for example, the Anchoring Achievement Initiative that we were working on with Deutsche Bank, America's Foundation, involved community-based organizations and networks across the 5 boroughs. And we worked very closely with them in terms of identifying what kind of information they needed, what information they wanted, and then identifying within CUNY and also nationally and internationally who could specifically bring the things that they had identified they wanted to know about or be trained to do. And so really putting the Academy at the service of the community-based organizations and having the community-based organizations call the shots in terms of the content and shape of the workshops. And then we also obliged the experts who were brought in to speak and present their research to listen to presentations by the community-based organizations in terms of the work that they were doing, because we often found that the one-way transmission of information was inadequate, and we wanted it to be a two-way or multi-way learning experience where everyone was experts in an area and given that authority and space to present their expertise. So those are just a couple of examples.
And I'm sorry to, we have 2 minutes left. I don't know if you want to, another question or just a conclusion or?
We don't have any more questions at the moment. If they keep coming, I will make sure to send them back to you. I'm not sure if you want to give a final comment.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. This has all been, a collaborative process, and there have been so many institutions and individuals involved from inside and outside of CUNY. So it's just a nice opportunity to share this work with people doing, I think, probably very relevant and important comparable work in other places. So we hope that there's a dialogue that's generated from this.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I will see you next month.
Okay.